This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, another exciting and fantastic program with another superb and on this occasion, very important guest. Before we get to him, a few in-house matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember we're a fan-generated program. We need all the help we can get. And we're also, one could say, under some persecution during this deep state and control era. And so we're shadow banned everywhere, censored everywhere. And so we really need all the help we can get. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit instant notifications. It's that bell you'll see under the video. Subscribe to our Rumble channel and hit instant notifications. Go to jamieglazov.com and support the show and tell everybody about it. Follow me on Twitter, Jamie Glazov. And as always, keep an eye on liveuptofreedom.com. That's Annie Cyrus's site. And support her fight for freedom. And most importantly, our guest tonight, what an honor and privilege, Jack Cashill, a writer, a producer, an investigator/journalist, and author of 17 books, including his latest, ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th. Jack Cashill, what an honor to be in your presence.
Jamie, the honor is all mine, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, Jack. Well, it's great to have you on, and our lives have kind of always been very parallel because many ways we have the same battle and we're writing about the same themes on many levels. And I just want to thank you because a lot of your books on Obama, on Muhammad Ali, a lot of what you revealed there, because it's not just about Ali, it was about that whole era and the forces that were involved. And of course, about this book you just wrote, ASHLI. I mean, this is where I want to start, kind of, Jack, that you talk about things that aren't talked about. You're an investigator because a lot of things aren't investigated. Why don't we just start with you on a personal level for a minute? What made Jack Cashill so curious about the things that we're not allowed to be curious about?
Well, you know, Jamie, it may date back to the fact that my father was a detective, police detective, Newark, New Jersey, where I grew up. And although he died when I was young, he was always, and my family in general, were really adamant about getting at the truth of things rather than just accepting what we were told. Because, you know, what we witnessed, in fact, I talk about in my previous book, Untenable, about the basically the collapse of urban America, that we were, even from the time I was an adolescent, I was being fed stories that I transparently knew were not true. And what actually the turning point for me, though, because I had been working in advertising and broadcasting, producing mostly commercial work, doing documentaries. And then when the internet hit, I realized that now I had the reportorial power of the New York Times, and I didn't have any of the binders that they had. I didn't have the restraints. So, you know, I'm curious now to see guys like Tucker Carlson, you know, now that they've escaped the Overton window, are saying, wow, this is great. Well, for a lot of us, we've been out there for the last 25 years because the major media leave the big stories on the table. I found that hard to believe at first when I got into it, that a story like my first major project was on TWA Flight 800, the plane that crashed off the coast of Long Island in 1996. It was apparently transparently shot down. Everyone knew it. And yet I walked in very tentatively because I didn't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I didn't want to get involved in a story unless I was sure I was right. And I was. And once I was convinced I was, I went forward with both a documentary and a book. And immediately, at that time, Jamie, I'd been writing regularly for the Weekly Standard, right? Mm-hmm. How's that for establishment conservative journalism? And they dropped me cold. They didn't want to even look into this. Right. Mm. And then I did the Ali book in between a couple other books. And then in 2008, you know, I got involved in a real time potential game changer in the 2008 election when I discerned that Barack Obama had massive help in writing Dreams from My Father, his acclaimed autobiography, his memoir. And at the time, I just thought, well, it's probably some left-wing poet or another, but the literati had anointed him the best writer in the White House since Abraham Lincoln. They were singing his praises all over the place, unapologetically, unabashedly. And then when I started investigating it, I realized, and I said it was one of these, oh God moments. Why did it have to be Bill Ayers? Why did Bill Ayers have to be the guy who was doctoring Obama's book? And when I went public with that in early October 2008, if the conservative media had just checked my thesis out, and I gave them all my material, I said, you tell me that I'm not right, right? And to a media, every print conservative media just walked away, said, we don't want to touch this. Because by October, they had reconciled themselves to the fact that Obama was going to win. Whereas you have guys like David Remnick, who was an Obama biographer, the editor of the New Yorker, he was saying if this were true or believed to be true by enough people, it would have been the end of Obama's candidacy. Because Obama, we would have established, was not only a literary genius, he was not a literary genius, he's a literary fraud, but he had allowed a communist, an unrepentant terrorist, to crawl around inside of his head for a couple of months to write their collective book. It would have been disaster for them. But fortunately, I think they counted on the cowardice of the establishment conservative media to ignore it. I mean, Rush Limbaugh talked about it, and my life went crazy for like a week, right? But there was no follow-up after that. No one wanted to talk to me.
Well, Jack, I have so much respect for you because one would think we were in the Soviet Union, because because my parents are from the Soviet Union, and they fought that evil empire. So the things that weren't allowed to be said or even thought, my parents did that and put their lives on the line. So I took that torch and I want to fight that. And all of a sudden we have to fight that here in the United States. And it's surreal, but it's happening. But I'm very interested in what's untouchable. And you touch it. So, for instance, your Ali book. I mean, when I read that, I was like, wow, but also just a little bit, I'm kidding that I was frightened, but you can feel a little bit of the fright because Ali, Muhammad Ali. And then all of a sudden you start reading Jack Cashill's book and he did that. He did that. Wow. And all of a sudden you start seeing not so much of a heroic individual, but something actually quite different on many levels. But you're not kind of allowed to touch Ali in our culture. And then Obama, very untouchable, not allowed to touch him, but you did it in your book on Masking Obama. There's these kind of demigods, gods in our culture, or there's something blasphemous that the left has created, because the left is its own religion, and they create these saints that you're not allowed to touch. And so now let's get to January 6th, because this story is, there's these awful villains, those January 6ers, and then there's the good people. But now your book, ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th, you show something very different. And ASHLI Babbitt, the last few minutes of her life, it turns out she's a former police officer, former law enforcement. She's joking with other authorities and police officers inside the Capitol. And then all of a sudden, several minutes, she's dead from being shot. But that's not the version that we're told. Let me stop talking so much. But overall, it's a thank you to you for always telling the untold story. And tell us why ASHLI is an untold story and what drew you to her and this January 6th narrative.
Yeah, and the word you used before, blasphemous, Jamie, is exactly right. And let me give you an example of, I would say, one of the more grotesque examples of civic blasphemy in our time. And that was putting police officer Brian Sicknick's remains in the rotunda of the Capitol for a ceremony that lasted for a couple of days. The last person so honored was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? And before her, civil rights veteran John Lewis. And now it's a Capitol police officer, Brian Sicknick. And here is what I learned in doing my research. It's just an example of how deeply ghoulish the lying has become on their side. One of the women I profile in the book is a woman named Sarah Carpenter, who is retired NYPD, medically retired. She comes just down for the day on impulse, driving back to New York City after the events at the Capitol. From the highway, she calls a friend in Maryland thinking of stopping by and tells a friend where she was, and a friend just goes bananas. She freaks out. She says, you killed a man. You killed a police officer. Sarah says, what? No, you protested. You pro-Trump people killed a Capitol police officer with a fire extinguisher. And this woman's husband is retired Capitol Police. So Sarah thinks she absolutely must know what she's talking about. Sarah was devastated. She thought she had a good time. Everything went well. And now she's finding out that she's affiliated with murderers. And she can't even get out of bed the next morning. She's so upset. And so this thought is blazoned in her head. Well, here's what happened, Jamie. But most Americans don't. Brian Sicknick had to find, did okay on January 6th. He had no particular trauma at all. On January 7th, unfortunately, because Sicknick was allegedly a Trump supporter, he dies of a series of strokes. Now, someone on January 7th, deep within the DC establishment, made the decision to wed the rumored death by fire extinguisher to the very sad death of Brian Sicknick by stroke on January 7th. And so that resulted in a January 8th front page lead in the New York Times saying that pro-Trump protesters had bashed Brian Sicknick over the head with a fire extinguisher. And then they add this ghastly detail. He was rushed out of the Capitol with a huge gash and blood flowing through it and taken to the hospital. Totally fictional story. And that froze anyone who might have supported the protesters in their place. Now, with George Floyd, we had the autopsy report within a week. With Brian Sicknick, it lasted more than 100 days before they released it. And only then, because Judicial Watch forced it out with a lawsuit.
And Jack, they need their martyrs, right?
Right. And they needed that martyr to offset the genuine martyr that they had created on January 6th when they shot ASHLI Babbitt just recklessly. A panicky police officer, Capitol Police, no warning, not in uniform. She's 110 pounds. He could have just caught her in his hands, And there was barricaded doors. There were 7 police officers on ASHLI's side of the doors. She, as you said, Jamie, she's military police, 14 years. She comes up, there's 3 cops guarding the door. She's the only one there along with a trailing videographer. And they're joking, right? And then this big crowd comes, fills up the hallway. And when you're 5'2", that can become ominous in itself because she didn't like to be, caught in these crowds. So then they're pressing in. And then one guy, his name's Zachary Lamb, he has no social media ties to Trump or MAGA. He starts punching the window out between where the officers are standing in this row of doors. And ASHLI starts yelling at the cops. She goes, do your effing job. Call for effing backup. Come on. You can't let this happen. And you can see her getting visibly frustrated by the chaos that this guy is creating. Then the guy backs off and there's no immediate threat. And then the police officers inexplicably walk away. They just leave the doors unguarded. At that point, Alam grabs a helmet and breaks out one of the windows. And now ASHLI, then we hear, there's a gun. At which point, ASHLI jumps into that window frame, likely thinking the gun was on her side of the doors. These are heavily barricaded doors. And then Michael Burr just shoots and kills her. One shot, bam. Captain Byrd. Now he was Lieutenant Michael Byrd. Now he's Captain Byrd.
If ASHLI was a black woman in a Black Lives Matter demonstration and a white cop shot her, do you think there would be a different narrative around all of this in our culture?
Oh, we know that just from the Breonna Taylor stuff in 2020, where Breonna gets in the way of her drug selling boyfriend shooting out, a gunfight with the police, and she becomes a semi-martyr. We would have forgotten about George Floyd if this had been, if these had been, let's say they were Palestinian protesters, right? And the police did this, or if they'd been protesters at the what's in Kavanaugh hearings, right? Which they did interrupt, and they, got in the way of an official proceeding, obstructed an official proceeding, for which the J6ers are going to prison for 3 years. The Kavanaugh protesters got $30 to $50 fines. I mean, this is how two-tier. It doesn't do justice to the injustice been visited on these people.
But thank you, Jack. But look, the establishment media painted this as all these police officers getting murdered, all these people dying by the insurrection. But the truth of the matter is that it's actually the opposite. We've got ASHLI dying, then we have Rosanne Boyland dying. Who really died on whose side?
Well, there were 4 people died on January 6th. All of them were pro-Trump protesters. ASHLI Babbitt was killed, obviously, in police action. Rosanne Boyland was killed in a police action as well. Hers may have been a little more grotesque than even ASHLI's, since as she lay there dying or dead, a police officer, a female, picks up a branch that had been thrown up there and starts bashing her over the head. She's like swinging the branch like it was a sledgehammer, hitting her right over the head, bam, bam, bam. Rosanne was probably still alive at that moment. She had been suffocated under a pile. She'd been gassed and then suffocated when police cleared out this tunnel and pushed a crowd of people on top of her. She was at the bottom of the pile. And the guy next to her, Philip Anderson, barely survived. And she grabs his hand and then she lets it go. And, her boyfriend is nearby crawling out, Rosanne, she's dying, but help, everyone. These guys are crying, saying to the police, help her, help us. There's a pile of people that they're not responsible for. And the police are standing back. I mean, this happens in like my father's a cop. I tend to defend cops, but you can defend their action to that point. What you cannot defend is a policewoman picking up a branch and smashing over the head 3 times until the branch broke in her hands. If that happened in the summer of 2020, reversing races, this policewoman is sitting in the cell next to Derek Chauvin. It was that bad. It's all captured on video. And then there's Victoria White.
And we never hear Rosanne Boyland's name.
No. And it's partly because her death was a little harder to discern because it took about a year for the video to come out. In ASHLI's case, there was a BLM guy in the hallway who took a video and sold it to CNN that night. And he passed himself off as a journalist who's indifferent to was just there to capture the action. Turns out he was on his own video. He was provoking the crowd. He was, let's go burn this effort down, blah, 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 blah. He was your classic agent provocateur, right? And he takes the video, he sells it to CNN. So it's on TV that night. They can't deny that. So what do? They do 2 things, Jamie. They defame ASHLI in the New York Times the next day, and then they murder. They have Brian Sicknick murdered. They create a murder scenario for this poor police officer who dies of a stroke. Utterly, as the autopsy report showed, utterly unrelated to the events of January 6th.
And he was also a supporter of Donald Trump, which is an insult to injury. Yeah. But Jack, you mentioned Derek Chauvin, and this is all interconnected. So it might seem that I'm jumping around or we're jumping around, but we're not jumping around at all because it's one big puzzle, but we just put the pieces and it all starts tying together. So we've obviously got the powers that be that are up to something. Then somehow the media, just like Roger Stone for some reason they need all these helicopters and SWAT, and somehow CNN is there during the raid, right? So they all kind of are working together. So Derek Chauvin, the autopsy, as you document, Dr. Andrew Baker, he does an autopsy, doesn't find any evidence of strangulation or asphyxiation. Then he gets a phone call. And then all of a sudden he puts, strangulation or whatever the theme is, he puts that into a report after he gets a certain phone call. This is creepy as the F word, one could say. Tell us about it.
Right, and it's a threatening phone call. It was the guy who called him just happened to be the medical examiner for the District of Columbia on January 6th, Dr. Roger Mitchell. And Mitchell calls Baker, and Mitchell was deputy mayor of Washington. He was very influential. And this comes up in, up curiously, Jamie, as you probably know, Mitchell was the one who first brought this attention to light because he bragged to the state prosecutors how he had called Andrew Baker, the Minneapolis guy, and said, listen, unless you modify that report and add neck compression, I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to run an op-ed in the New York Times, and you're going to regret ever having been the odd man out here. And it is Mitchell who's at the controls on January 6th when they start suppressing the autopsy reports, not only of Brian Sicknick for 100 days, but also Roseanne Boylan. And that delay allowed the Democrats to get their narrative. Just as a little aside, Jamie, and it sort of speaks to the side of the fence that we walk on, the outside the Overton window side. When I told my daughter I was going to write a new book, she said, Dad, it's not on Derek Chauvin, is it? I said, no. It's only on ASHLI Babbitt. She was relieved. It was on.
You're very predictable.
Yeah, right.
The dissident.
A hard sell,
The dissidents in totalitarian societies, you always know what they're going to start talking about. It's everything that you're not supposed to talk about.
But what they have in common, what Derek Chauvin has in common with the 1,450 or whatever J6ers have been arrested, is that it's a political arrest, it's a political imprisonment, and it's done to sell the Democratic agenda. Absolutely.
And Jack, so, we've got the powers that be, and we know that there's such a thing as free will. They can't control everything. And, because my study of the Cold War, for instance, I don't think I'm naive, but there were some things that startled me as well studying, because I don't put anything past what we might know and And, so there were some. It turned out that the communists and KGB had plotted for the Soviet Union to fall, but then that was a trick. And then even the Sino-Soviet split was a trick in order to relax the West, and then to So I was very skeptical of a lot of this stuff, but at the same time, we don't have to be too skeptical because not everything always goes their way. So what I'm getting at here is they plotted a lot of things, but then there was the coup against Gorbachev, and then with Yeltsin, and they lost a lot of the republics, and they wanted Germany, and they never got Germany. So the bad guys don't get everything their way because there's free will and there's good guys. But we shouldn't be naive about what they're plotting and who they are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jamie, about we tend to attribute the superpowers to our to the left, and they screw up. They make mistakes. In defense of Michael Byrd, he was part of nobody's plan. His shooting of ASHLI Babbitt was, from their perspective, a terrible mistake. And they had to compensate by having Brian Sicknick murdered. Another person who wasn't part of the plan was Kamala Harris.
Jack, 1 second. Did Byrd just panic?
Yeah. Yes. And not only after by the way, he had a really checkered record. He should have been fired a long time ago for gun violations and whatnot.
Okay, tell us about the genius Kamala Harris. I just, when Kamala talks to the kids about space, I'm just so fascinated. I mean, the intelligence is just over our head, but go ahead.
Well, in this case, her intervention was unwitting. I was just reading a story by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's a Sherlock Holmes story, right? And I think it's called The Silver or something. I don't know. But, and It's about Sherlock Holmes is about trying to solve a crime of a stolen racehorse. And one clue he gets is that as somebody's saying, well, what time did the dog bark? And the guy says, well, that's it. Curious. The dog didn't bark. Well, on January 6th, and that leads Sherlock Holmes to deduce that that dog knew the thief, right? That thief, that you had a limited circle of people who knew the dog that was watching this horse. Well, on January 6th, Kamala was the dog that did not bark. She shows up at the Democratic National Committee just at the witching hour of 1 o'clock, just when everything was happening. The bombs were being found. Ray Epps was bringing his crew to breach the first bicycle racks. And so the first bomb is called in from near the Republican National Committee about 1:45. Then they alert the Capitol Police, and they search the Democratic National Committee headquarters. And just about 1 o'clock, they find the second bomb, right? And the one thing they weren't counting on, though, was for Kamala Harris to be within feet of this horrible, dangerous bomb planted by these dastardly J6 terrorists inside the DNC. And that meant also that the Secret Service was there. That meant also that the Secret Service had done a sweep of the building with a bomb-sniffing dog and didn't turn up anything. So this whole bomb plot, which was designed, I think, as a backup in case they didn't get the J6 response they were hoping for. You know, they could say, well, look at these, they planted bombs, these horrible people. And of course, the MAGA people were blamed for the bombs. But here's what didn't happen. The dog didn't bark. For 1 year, Jamie, we didn't know that Kamala Harris was at the DNC at that moment. In fact, dozens of protesters were tried under the pretext that Kamala Harris was one of those people threatened at the Capitol when she was never at the Capitol. So for a year, neither she nor Joe Biden says anything. And for the last 3.5 years, they still haven't said anything. Kamala Harris, drama queen that she is, don't you think she'd be out there saying, you know, she compared this to September 11th. It's like she was on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center, right? As close as she was to the action here, literally feet from this bomb. But she has never mentioned the fact that she was in danger, nor has Joe Biden mentioned it, right? Which means they know that whoever planted the bombs is not supposed to be caught. They may not have known it immediately, but they found that out. And so it's like a $500,000 reward, national manhunt. No, I call him in the book John Doe number 3, right? The bomber. After John Doe number 2, you probably remember, in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
They got the national manhunt for McVeigh's partner that the FBI just kind of lets go away because John Doe number 2, like John Doe number 3, the pipe bomber, is probably a confidential human source for the FBI or someone related to that.
It's funny kind of looking back at everything, and we begin to see all the way back to the Kennedy assassination, just something's not right. And we often even feel like we're in some kind of simulation, that something's going on. But the intelligence agencies, it turns out, obviously aren't the good guys. That people like me, whose parents escaped the Soviet Union, I love America so much. I really thought the FBI and CIA were so good, you know, at a time in my life. Or, I mean, not that much, but I just mean in general. And then you realize that there are enemies as well on many levels, right?
Well, you know, like I said, my father's a police officer. I grew up around cops. My uncle and my cousins. I always looked up to the FBI. Always. Yeah. I thought about becoming an FBI agent. You know, I was a phone friend with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who played in, you know, over an odd subject, intelligent design, because we were both into that. And I know a lot of FBI agents, and a lot of them are really good people. Yeah. A lot of them are chafing, you know, but they've got pension. Pension is the thing that holds these guys in their grips. And so,
and it's very dangerous to be a whistleblower.
Oh, totally. As like Stephen Friend and those other guys found out, when you're a whistleblower against the deep state, you're an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
When you're a whistleblower against MAGA, you're like, what's the name? Hutchinson, you're a hero, even if you're making stuff up. Cassidy Hutchinson, is that her name? I think that's her name. The one who had Trump arrested the Secret Service.
Jack, you don't have to go into detail here, and maybe I shouldn't ask this, but has in your life you've received maybe some information that maybe you should back off a little bit?
I've had 1,000 people tell me, Jamie, watch your back. You probably get that all the time too. I will say this, just to be honest, I've never gotten a threat that caused me to lose a night's sleep.
Okay. Is that because the threat didn't come, or because you're a very brave man?
I would say it's because I typically don't have firsthand information. So if something bad happened to me, it would cause more problems for the conspirators because see, they can ignore me, right? As long as the New York Times and the Washington Post maintains that Praetorian guard around the information, it doesn't really matter what we say because they'll just deny it, right?
Yeah.
And I discovered that for 1 month, in the month of October of 2008, I had the potential to dethrone Barack Obama before he took the throne. And no one threatened me, but I talked to a lot of frightened people. The people who could have done something were frightened.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your bravery. Let's take a quick break with our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.
And that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to go to mypillow.com or mystore.com and use promo code GG21. Because when you do that, you can get a discount of up to 60% off on all the amazing products. And you're going to be helping Mike Lindell as well as the Glazov Gang. And if you like one-of-a-kind made art, handmade art, make sure to go to lutfstudio.com and purchase resin art pieces made by our one and only, the great Annie Cyrus, the producer of the Glazov Gang. Use promo code GLAZOV to get special discounts. And we are back with Jack Cashill. Jack, how is your pillow doing?
I got I think it was when Mike Lindell first got in trouble, I bought everyone I knew My Pillow for Christmas.
Okay, there we go.
My wife is now the Giza sheets and pillows and towels and moccasins. My house is like a cushion by Mike Lindell.
Okay, this is going to be a great new advertising clip for us. Thank you, Jack. Jack, January 6th, there's many layers of what happens. It's often not, as we said, just this one bit, one thing, but is one of the realms, could one of the realms be labeled by the word entrapment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, what I wanted to do in writing my book, ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th, is to get the perspective of ordinary people who went to Washington and why they went, right? And to find out who these people were, what their consequences were, and how they ended up, of the 10 women that I profile, and I picked them almost randomly. Fortunately, all 8 of the living women agreed to cooperate, as did ASHLI Babbitt's mother, Mickey Woodhoff. But of the surviving 8, 2 were killed. Of the surviving 8, 6 are in prison or have been to prison, and 2 are awaiting sentencing. Among those 2 is a great-grandmother who drove by herself from Colorado Springs. She went to the Capitol to pray, and now she's looking at a year in prison. She'll get her sentence in August.
How old is she?
She is in her mid-70s.
Mid-70s. Her crime, she's a grandmother. Her crime is praying, and she's going to jail?
She's waiting a sentencing. She was convicted on all 4 counts. I went to a trial in March, and it's, the DC juries what they have in common is they're all bored. They're all just waiting to write their verdict down and get out of there, No single defendant yet has been acquitted by a DC jury, none of the J6ers. But many of them felt entrapped. They used that word. They'd been snared, not by Donald Trump. What's impressive about these women is that none of them regrets having gone to Washington that day. None of them blames Trump for their predicament. And in the one curious case of Roseanne Boylan, whose family were liberal, and the brother-in-law of Roseanne, called his buddy at MSNBC, Ayman Mohyeldin, and he wanted to shift the blame to Donald Trump and QAnon, and he wanted MSNBC to investigate how Roseanne was snared by this evil genius Donald Trump and this mystical genius QAnon. So Mohyeldin does a 5-part podcast, which is, for me, invaluable. And you see him being pulled down the rabbit hole, and it's going someplace he doesn't want to go, because he and the family, Roseanne's family, are being stonewalled at every turn. They're being lied to at every turn. Her autopsy is withheld for 90 days, the maximum time. And then when they release it, and even though everyone knew how she died, there were scores of eyewitnesses, the autopsy report comes back with amphetamine overdose from her Adderall, right? And the family was outraged because the last thing they wanted was their daughter to be written off as a drug addict, their sister or their daughter. And so they begin to cooperate, the Boylan sisters begin to cooperate with Gateway Pundit, right? And now MSNBC's beside itself that they've lost hold of the Boylan family, the golden goose here. So it's an amazing story of that day. But of the 8 women who are either in prison or looking at prison, the worst crime any of them committed was to break a window. And that woman, she helped break a window. And that woman, the mother of 8, is now serving 57 months in a West Virginia prison. To put that in contrast, the lawyer, the female lawyer who firebombed the police car during the George Floyd riots in New York City, got 15 months, right? The Kavanaugh protesters, many of whom were arrested for disrupting an official proceeding, got $30 to $50 fines, right? I mean, it's just astonishing the differential treatment these people get.
And it's a savage cruelty because they hate us so much, don't they, Jack? The people who want freedom in this country, they hate us. And the January 6th people, they are the ones who are hated the most. And there's a certain sadistic cruelty being dished out to them, right?
Absolutely. And what January 6th gave them was a mythology that they could use to justify their hatreds. And as a counter mythology to the madness we had to watch and they had to suffer all summer, right? In the George Floyd riots and the Breonna Taylor riots and the guy in Kennesaw riots, whatever it is, I forget the names now. Yeah, and so to talk to them about January 6th, to untell the story they've been telling themselves, it's like untelling, it's like, someone walking up to me and telling me, Jesus Christ is a fraud and the Bible's a sham, right? That's how bad this way.
They're unreachable.
Right. It's their religious testament. It's their gospel. It's their Bible.
Oh, January 6th. January 6th. Oh, you can't reach them. They're far gone. They've watched Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow and Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon so much that they're gone and never coming back.
No. And when the article I had on front page was about the hearing, the January 6th committee hearing, right? And let me just read this one. This is from Benny Thompson's forward. He's the chairman. That mob showed up. They were armed. They were angry. They believed the big lie, the election had been stolen. And when Donald Trump pointed them toward the Capitol and told them to fight like hell, that's exactly what they did. This paragraph is wrong in every single detail, right? But they believe it. First of all, they weren't armed. It was a spectacular act of self-restraint on the part of the protesters. Not a single one of them in the Capitol was armed, other than with like the arms. They say armed, they mean they picked up a flagpole or, they picked up zip ties or something. They were not angry. They were joyous. Every account I have is Roseanne Boylan, ASHLI, Babbitt. They were having the time of their lives. People singing Kumbaya, grandmothers pushing baby carriages, people of every race, creed, and color. They're so happy to be among so many people who are like them, unmasked, which was a big part of this factor. And there was a big lie. And okay, we're going to have to still making believe that the election was fair? Well, here's what we don't have to make believe anymore, that it wasn't rigged. Because 2 weeks before the election, the Democrats, whoever we want to call them, pulled off the most flagrant act of political interference in my lifetime. That is, gathering 51 intel officers to swear that Hunter Biden's laptop was a Russian hack and dump job. This is a laptop that the FBI had for a year. They knew, right?
Those 51 individuals should be in jail, no?
Yeah, I think so. Because this is where the trap comes. Many of the women I spoke to, for them, that was the final straw. They saw through this. They knew they were being lied to. They didn't believe the election was the freest and fairest in history. Hell, Abraham Lincoln, Jamie, knew the election outcome before he went to bed on election night 1860, right? And here they didn't know until a week later, until they decided to turn the day of protest, the scheduled day of protest, into the day of celebration. So they were lured. They weren't lured by Trump. Here's the thing that's overlooked even by the Trump people. And this is a critical fact. Trump started an hour late. I think the conspirators expected him to start on time. He said he'd start at 11 a.m. If he had started at 11 a.m., thousands of those people would have arrived at the breach point at 1 o'clock, just when Ray Epps was starting and his crew were starting their movement. Instead, they weren't there. They were 45 minutes away, back at the ellipse. So when Trump says, Benny Thompson quotes him, saying, fight like hell, that's what they did. They just went, no. When he said fight like hell, the grenadiers from the Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police Department were already lobbing live ammunition into a peaceful crowd and gathered in front of the west side of the Capitol. We're talking rubber bullets, flashbangs, tear gas. And the crowd they couldn't disperse. They were trapped in there, right? And that's what made them angry. And you hear the police officer saying, you know, for every one person we disarm, we're making 10 angry. That's when the crowd got angry. They weren't angry until that point.
And Jack, you know, sometimes when we think about this spiritual war we're in and the way that the devil and demons work, it's not always that they just have a pitchfork and horns and just doing just straightforward evil stuff. That there's always this also weird perversion going on. And a lot of times when those of us who try to be good people and try to fight for the side of good, it's like what we're seeing, we're not even sure if we're seeing what we're seeing. So when you even bring up Biden and Kamala, I often think this has got to be some kind of almost sadistic joke on us. Just when you look at Biden and then Kamala laughing, and it's almost some kind of choreographed sadistic joke and torture, mind torture of those of us that love this country. And then when, you know, we put it on TV today and we see these drag queens dancing in front of kids. And recently I saw one, he or she, whatever it is dancing and pulling out a baby from her private parts. It's a plastic, and it's just, we're not even really sure what we're seeing. And why I'm bringing this up is even when we watch the January 6th videos, are we seeing what we're seeing? Because some of those videos, the cops are going, and then inside the Capitol, they've got some people arrested and and then all of a sudden they let them go and turn around and they do daps with each other.
Yeah, it's
what the F is going on?
Well, you know, it's odd. You're absolutely right about that, because, you know, the first people got into the building about a little after 2:00, right? And so by 2:15, 2:30, there are a half dozen doors or windows open. And yet for the next 2 hours, the police guarded that one tunnel entrance like it was a friggin' Alamo. That's where Roseanne Boylan died. That's where Victoria White suffered the worst beating captured on video since Rodney King. But in the meantime, the people are walking through, they're honoring the rope lines, they're laughing and they're joking, taking selfies, right? Not knowing, or praying, not knowing the 10 minutes of prayer inside the Capitol that you walked into through an open door is going to wreck your life forever. No, I sometimes feel this happened right after COVID, you know, the lockdown started. And I was protesting from day one, as were every one of these women. They were all COVID dissidents, every single one of them. I didn't expect to find that. But I remember waking up one morning after we started the lockdown, I said, I feel like an extra in a science fiction movie. And I don't know, no one's told me how it ends, right? You know, and we're just wandering around here waiting for the director to tell us to do something sane. In the meantime, you know, it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like I'm the last person who still has his body intact, right? And the mob's chasing us with their pitchforks, and people need to watch the movie. It's a classic communist movie.
No, I seen that one. It was awesome. Jack, thank you though for at least helping with some light in the darkness in terms of all of this. And so our time is running out. I wish we had another 2 hours, but this is directly connected again, and people might think I'm jumping around. I'm not really jumping around. You've documented quite a bit about the people who died around Hillary and Bill. So we've got this long, some people call it a kill list, might be a little justified, but there's this long list. I mean, when I go through this list of people who have died around the Clintons or committed suicide around the Clintons, it's quite a long list. And then you've documented the Ron Brown story. So a lot of people, oh, Ron Brown, you know, helicopter crash. And that's the official version. Ron Brown, helicopter crash. You've looked into it, and God bless you. He had a bullet in his brain. Why isn't this talked about?
Well, you know, because the 4 people who went public with that information, and one of them has become a very good friend of mine, the woman, the photographer who discovered the hole, had their Navy career, their armed force careers ruined, destroyed, right, for going public. You know, I started that book, and I had a nice advance, And I said to them, the publisher, I said, listen, the end of the game, the end of the story may be plane crashes, stuff happens, I can't guarantee that. I'm not going to create a conspiracy here if there is not one, right? But at the end of the book, I came to the conclusion that the dispassionate observer looking at the evidence says, yeah, he was killed. And he was killed for a very specific reason. And that is because he threatened to rat out the Clintons on their China trade. And this is before the 96 election. Couldn't happen. So people say, you've probably heard this, Jamie, do you believe there's 50, the Clintons had 50 people killed? And I say, what if it's only 2 or 3, out of 50, what if it's only a handful, right? How many do you need before it becomes shocking? How many women do you have to rape before you become a rapist? How many people have to kill before you become a murderer? They were, say what you will about Obama, say what you will even about Biden. The Clintons were the most evil people ever to occupy the White House.
Well, I'm not going to get too vehement in disagreeing with you. Jack, January 6th, prisoners. Is there a Gulag archipelago in this country?
There is right now. I'm in touch with some of these guys. Some of them have been there for 3 years without a trial, right? And they're, a lot of them are put up in what they call it, the Gulag. It's the DC Correction Center, whatever they call it. It's unfortunate that they're there. I found myself while I was researching this at night, rereading Solzhenitsyn because he got it, he understood it. And it's really, I know it's not an easy read, but at some point in everyone's life, it should be a required read. He was a brilliant guy and he was way ahead of his curve on understanding the problems in America when he came here in the late 1970s. He saw things that we didn't see yet. Yeah. The moral rot at the heart of the liberal enterprise. And he called us out on it. And we were all offended at the time. How dare he? We are the land of freedom. Well, he knew something we didn't know.
Jack, I'm a little bit depressed leaving this conversation. I feel a little bit guilty in interrupting a little bit too much and that we can't continue this conversation, but let's have a round 2 soon. Under 60 seconds, tell our audience why ASHLI, the Untold Story of the Women of January 6th, is a book that they must read if they haven't already.
I found the story uplifting. Here's what I find. I like positive stories about real people. When I'm writing about Obama, I try to find the heroes within that story. In this case, we have 10 women who saw the world the way it was better than all the people with advanced degrees and Ivy Towers. And they acted on what they saw. They went to protest because that was the one last freedom they had. And every one of them has been severely punished for it, but none of them broke. And that's to me, the encouraging part. None of them left, and I'm talking about the 8 living women. None of them said, gosh, we should never have gone to Washington. We were deceived. We were fools. We were taken in by the big lie. No, they'll tell you today that big lie is a big lie. They'll tell you today the election was rigged, if not outright stolen. They'll tell you today that what they went there to fight for, not women's issues, but the same thing the men did, constitutional freedoms, constitutional rights, the rule of law, are as more powerful a draw today than ever. And in November 2024, those rights are up, they're fully at stake. As the future of our country hinges on that election.
Jack, you are a scholar and a gentleman, a freedom fighter, a truth teller. But I want to tell you something. You seem like also a very cool guy, somebody would want to hang around with for hours. Do you got people calling you a lot and trying to hang out with you all the time?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends because Jamie, I like to have a good time. I'm sorry. Let's face it. I was born in the most bountiful country and the most bountiful time in the history of the world, right? I've had such an extraordinarily good life just being an ordinary citizen. I can't not appreciate that. I don't want to lose it. That's why I'm fighting for it. But none of us, we're not Soviet Union yet. And,
yes.
We're not waking up yet. Like Whittaker Chambers talked about hearing that scream in the middle of the night. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We still have 4 months to prevent that from happening. And so take your energy, go get a beer, have a good time, and fight like hell.
Absolutely. Jack, thank you for coming on the Glazov Gang. I apologize I didn't warn you ahead of time. Once you come on the Glazov Gang and you become a member, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
I think I'm already a member.
Okay. Jack, keep up the fight. The Glazov Gang loves you and supports you and is cheering you on. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to come back, Jamie, anytime.
Thank you.
Take care, sir.
Thank you so much. And to all of our viewers, it's a priority. Get ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th by Jack Cashill. Don't do anything else but that. And we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.